Hey guys, Matthew, and welcome to my second edition of the currency tier list for Path of Exile. So last video we made the week 1 currency tier list, and today I'll be making the day 1 currency tier list. As for the 1 month currency tier list, will be coming shortly. So there's two things I want to say before I get going. First off, I can't seem to get my webcam settings right, so I don't know what I look like. I might look a little white, I might look a little yellow, I might look a little red. Can't get it right, whatever. Now that's out of the way, let me explain another thing. So in this tier list, I'll be talking about the day 1 currency tier list, but more so than the day 1, I'll be talking about the first part of the league. And for me, the first part is the first 3 days. So in my opinion, the leagues are divided in about 3 different stages. The first stage is day 1 to 3. The second stage is about day 4 to the half of the second week, or the end of the second week. And then the third stage is the third week until the end of the league. That's kind of how I cut out the league. That's the phases. So the reason for that is because if I make a day 1 tier list that is only for day 1, it's going to be a little bit plain because there's a lot of things that are just not available on the first day of a league, right? So I'll be talking about day 1, but also day 2 and day 3. But whenever I do speak about day 2 and day 3 for specific things, I'll mention the fact that I am, as to, to make it a little bit more clear for you guys. So there's a lot to talk about, as always. This one's also going to be a bit of a long one, so let's jump right into it. So first off, we have Ancient Orbs, which is for gambling for headhunters. Obviously, it's going to be an F tier. It was an F tier in the last video. It's also going to be an F tier here, but it's even worse here because not only are you gambling for headhunter, but you're also gambling with probably little to no currency whatsoever. So for most people, even if they had the currency, they wouldn't do it because it would be really, really bad. But for the vast majority of people, they won't even have the currency or the Nemesis unlocked on their MAD device. So it's just an F tier because not only is it bad, but it's not even available. Next, we have Cyrus. So this is why I mentioned day 1, 2, and 3, because obviously a lot of people are not necessarily going to be able to get to and do Cyrus on day 1. But for the people who are able to do Cyrus on day 1, day 2, and day 3, or anywhere along those lines, Cyrus is actually pretty good. Pretty much every single Cyrus drop is going to have some value in the first 3 days of a league, especially on day 1. For example, the Crown of the Inward Eye, the helmet that he drops, which I believe is his most common drop out of all of them, is actually worth a good bit of currency. At least an Exalt on the first day of a league, and potentially a lot more, but it does devaluate very quickly. Towards the end of the first week, it's already pretty much worthless. But for the first few days, it's actually really good. So A tier. Now, of course, you wouldn't be buying Cyrus and you wouldn't be selling your Cyrus. Nobody's going to be buying yours and nobody's going to sell you theirs. It's just not that way. It's more a side thing as you're mapping. The result of your mapping and all that, Cyrus is going to spawn. The Conquerors are going to spawn. You're going to make some currency off of those. So don't be skipping them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Beast farming is going to be an F tier because honestly, for the first day of a league and even the first couple days, you're probably just going to be setting up. Beast farming, especially if you're doing it with 6 accounts by yourself, is going to be something long term. So in the first day of a league, you're going to be leveling your character and then probably going to be starting to set up all your different alt accounts. You should probably level all of them in one go, or because you don't really need to level them. You only have to power level them through the campaign, and that is very easily doable if you have a character in the mid 80s or something, even on a 4-link. The only problem might be like Act 10 Kitava, but that's pretty easy to just die over and over again until you get it done. But again, availability is not really going to be there. You're probably just going to be setting up. That being said, if you set up on the first day or the first couple days, if you can start farming beasts on the third day, you will already be starting to make profit because there are so many different things that early that are worth a lot. For example, one of the beasts gives you a random 6-link. That's mad profit right there. There's the beast for the random uniques that can give you everything in the game, including headhunters. There's the beast that gives you leveled and quality gems. Those can be pretty big for level 21 auras, etc., etc. There's a lot of stuff there. Next, we have Chaos Recipe. Chaos Recipe on the first day of a league is S tier. Second day of the league is probably a little bit less, and third day of the league a little bit less, and then it just keeps going downhill from there. But on the first day, it is an absolute S tier. It allows you to basically fund everything that that other people can't afford. So for example, for your build or for your mapping, for example, you know, chisels, alks, sextings, etc., all those things a lot of people are going to be struggling to buy if they're not doing the chaos recipe. You are going to be able to do to afford them easily, and of course be able to upgrade your build before other people are. Essentially, chaos recipe is pretty much, if you're playing in Trade League, it's almost mandatory to do if you want to have a successful league start as a solo player. Now, of course, in group play, it's a bit different. You can completely ignore it. It depends on your strategy and whatnot, but solo play, it is amazing. Next, we have Chayula, so that's going to be an F tier because for the first day of a league, nobody's going to be farming Chayula, right? The splinters are not even really going to be available because they drop in higher tier maps. At least they have a better chance of doing so. That being said, day 2, you could already start looking to the farming Chayula, and day 3, your Chayula farming, if that's your plan, should already be going good. You should be dropping those blessings, making those presents of Chayula. You know, nobody really goes low life on the first day of a league, so nobody cares about, you know, Chayula. Nobody really needs a blessing, but as early as day 2, people are going to want that presence of Chayula. They're going to want those blessings. So people are going to want also the chess pieces, right? The skin of the loyal and all that. So very good. As early as day 2, you would go all the way from F to probably A, and on day 3, it would probably become an S tier, because you could also sell the carries as well for XP for people. But like I said, the blessings alone, which is about a 50% drop rate, I believe, something like that. Like you get it or you don't. Without being a meme, it's actually, I think, a 50%. So it's really good because the blessings alone are going to pay for the entirety of your runs, meaning everything that drops in there, including the maps, of course, are just pure profit. The currency is pure profit. The uniques are pure profit. Everything is just really good. And you also get a lot of gem experience as well. So S tier starting on day 3, for sure. Next, we have contracts. Contracts are going to be S tier as well. Of course, I mean, they drop everything in the game. You can get some early game fossils, you can get some maps, you can get a ton of uniques, you can get some harbingers, some beachheads, everything in the game, really. So contracts are S tier. Now, we don't know how available they will be, but I expect them to be pretty available. I mean, if they don't change how the the whole mechanic works, you can literally buy contracts, level up, de-level yourself, and rebuy contracts over and over again, which is something people did in Heist League, actually. In the early stages after Blood Aqueducts, they would literally just de-level themselves as soon as they leveled to rebuy those level 67 contracts before getting to maps. So yeah, lots of jewelry also for Chaos Recipe available in there. Next, we have the Xana Delirium mod. Now that's probably just not going to be available, so I'll put it into F tier. To be able to unlock, if it's on the map device, it's the 16 Chaos map device mod, and it requires you to have quite a bit of your Atlas actually done. So for most people, even in the first 3 days, it's not really going to be a possibility. That being said, if you're one of these people who is able to get to the end of to you know, the Xana mod, the 16 Chaos Xana mod for Delirium as early as day 1, 2, or 3, you should absolutely take advantage of it. It would probably be an S tier. Because again, it's another kind of league mechanic that drops you everything in the game, but also especially simulacrum splinters, and the demand for simulacrums is always super duper high, because, you know, voices and all that good stuff. Even a Salem is really good. Pretty much every simulacrum drop is wanted early game, before the markets are flooded. Next, we have Delirium Orbs. That's also probably going to be an F tier, not because it's bad, but more so because it's not really available. Now, the difference between Delirium Orbs and the Xana Delirium Mirror is that if you want to do 20%, 40%, 60% Delirium, you're going to need a really good build, which is actually a bit of a problem with the Xana Delirium mod, but less so. And the reason why I'm putting into an F tier is most people just won't have a build that's even capable of doing delirious maps at that point. So that's an F tier. Flipping. So there's a few different things we need to talk about when it comes to flipping, because some of them are going to be good and some of them are going to be bad. So I typically take flipping and I put it into 2 different categories. The first category is going to be an F tier, and that is going to be bulking. Nobody is really going to pay extra for bulk deals in the first stage of the league, the first few days, because really nobody needs anything in bulk, right? Nobody's going to be buying 200 of your prophecies to blast, some juice on their maps, because nobody needs that, right? People are busy trying to just get to the end game, get to the Atlas, get to Cyrus, and all that good stuff. So F tier there. Now, the second part of flipping is going to be buying low and selling high. And once again, that part of flipping kind of goes into two different routes. There's going to be the buying low and selling high, or actually 3 different routes, my bad. So the first route is going to be divination card flipping. Now, divination card flipping is actually an A tier. Now, if I would have made this list 6 months ago, it would have been an S tier. But because of the API nerfs, because of the amount of bots that started flipping div cards, because of the amount of people that started div card after I made it like a public thing that was really good, it became worse and worse and worse. And nowadays, div card flipping is not as good as it used to be. Now, it's still really good. Don't get me wrong. It's still pretty good. But it's not the same gold mine than it used to be. So A tier for div card flipping in the first stage of a league, the first 3 days. In the first day of a league, it's also really, really good. Now, there's a million different div cards that you can actually look into. That is very league dependent. The next part of flipping is going to be unique flipping. So unique flipping is buying well-rolled items for the same price of regular rolls and reselling them for higher due to the fact that people don't need to spend divines on them, which a lot of the time is actually a big advantage to the buyer, but also a big advantage to the seller because they're getting more for their uniques. So for those unique items, it's not very good. It's probably about a C tier or maybe even a D tier. And the reason for that is because nobody really wants to spend the extra currency for better rolls on their items early. They just want to get whatever items fits their build and allows them to play their build better, right? Allows them to do better content, higher tier content, whatever it is. They don't care about that extra 5 HP that they're going to get off of a perfect roll because it looks good. The vast majority of people don't. So for the first stage of a league, it's not great. Now, past the 3rd day, now if we're talking about the 1 week mark, of course, people are going to start spending for a little bit of extra, stats here and there, 1% damage there, 2% damage there. It all adds up and people will, but the first stage, first 3 days, not so much. And the last part of flipping, which is going to be S tier, is going to be rares. Now, the thing about rare item flipping is that you need good filters, and good filters require either good game knowledge or, to have, yoink them from somebody else or something. That's going to be up to you on how you make your filters and how you acquire them. But good filters are insane in the first few days of a league. For example, you could take a ring with like 60 life, which is T2 life, and like 100 resistances, and that would be worth maybe, 10 to 20 C or something, right? Pretty decent ring, nothing crazy. But you could buy that for 10, 20 C with an open suffix and then craft a double res, and then that 100 res becomes like 130, and all of a sudden that ring, which was 10, 20 C, is worth like 3 or 4 exalts. And with the amount of players that are playing in the first day of a league, in the first few days, the first week of a league, there are tons of these items being posted, and with the proper filters you can just snag them up and make some serious currency. Same goes for boots, same goes for gloves, helmets, but especially rings and boots are the 2 main things to focus on if you're going to be making your own filters before 3.13, or maybe look for them online. I have a few videos in regards to filters and how to make them. Also have, if I'm gonna chill out a little bit here, I also have my Patreon database with a billion different links to filters that are already pre-made and all that. So a little bit pay to win there, but hey, a man's got to pay his bills. So next we have fractured fossils, meaning deep delving. Nobody's going to be deep delving in the first few days of a league, so F tier, again, not because it's bad, but because it's not available. Same thing goes for incubators. It's not necessarily that they're awful, but nobody's really farming simulacrums. Nobody's really farming, mass tier emblems or anything like that. So there's just not a good availability on them, and I wouldn't go out of my way to buy some either. Same thing goes for the Gift of the Goddess, which is the 7 enchant lab. Not because it's bad, but more so the availability of the Gift of the Goddess itself. But Also, the difficulty, right? It is pretty hard to do this lab. Uber Zero, the Uber Zero, I should call him. He's actually really hard. He's really strong. He's got a lot of HP. He hits like a truck. So most builds just can't actually handle him in the first stage of a league, the first 3 days. That being said, if you make like a really tanky jug that just sits there and takes ages to kill him, but, you know, never dies, and you do full key runs, then there's actually, you know, it'd probably be about a B or an A tier. Because again, the availability is going to be messing with you. I think for the first 3 days, you're better off doing the normal lab, well, the normal Uber lab, which I'll talk about in a bit. Next, we have Scarab here, and that is basically for farming Betrayal. So Betrayal is probably about an A tier. It's not quite an S tier. It's not the best currency or anything like that, but it's really good. There's a lot of things that drop from Betrayal, and I mean, you don't really have to invest anything for Betrayal because you can literally farm in Act 9 in like the foothills or something to start getting those veiled items, and that's where the vast majority of your currency is going to come from Betrayal in the first stage of a league, again, the first 3 days. Those veiled items, people are going to be looking for all the weapons with open prefixes because they want chaos damage over time multiplier. People are going to be looking for Elyon jewelry, Leo jewelry for percent damage, Rin boots for the frozen mods, all that good stuff. Lots of crafters are going to be out there trying to get access to those different mods, and they will be willing to pay because the moment they have those available, people are going to flock to them for those crafts and give them tips, give them fees, and they're going to make their money back really, really fast. So yeah, farming Betrayal is actually an A tier, and it's a really good way to get some currency going early without needing any sort of investment because, again, in Act 9, you have Foothills, which is where Betrayal spawns in one of the best places to farm it in the game outside of maps. All right, next we can talk about Blighted maps. So Blighted maps, essentially on the first day of the league, you're not really going to be able to farm Blighted maps, at least not red tier Blighted maps, but you can easily farm white or yellow Blighted maps if you have a build that is pretty good at it as early as day 1. Now, day 2, day 3, you can move upward, move up to those red Blighted maps to start dropping those golden oils. But at the very least, the yellow maps will drop you silver oils. I think it's like T10s or something for silver oils. So you could start doing that, and it is pretty good. Blighted maps can drop anything in the game, level gems, quality gems, uniques. Obviously, you can get, league-specific uniques, like a Headhunter, for example. You get a lot of maps, oils. Oils are super sought after because people are going to want to anoint their things. Opalescent oil, crimson oil, silver, lots of them all have crazy demand early game, so it's pretty good. Now, I don't put it into S tier because obviously Blighted maps are a little bit long, and I don't think that yellows are S tier. That being said, if you get to like day 2, day 3, and you're capable of farming reds, then I think Blighted maps would probably be taken S tier ranking when it comes to red Blighted maps early because they're super, super, super good currency. So yeah. All right, next we have a Jagged Fossil, and that is for fractured wall farming in Delve. So what's great about fractured wall farming or broken wall farming in Delve early game is that it, again, doesn't really have any requirement. All that it requires is a build that's fast on its feet and flares, right? That's it, and dynamite, of course. That is it. There is no real investment into it, and the characters that do so are typically characters that are also kind of built for Uber Lab, so they're double purposes, those characters, just basically very, very quick ones. Now, I don't think it's the best currency in the game or anything like that, but it is pretty decent, and the reason for that is because a lot of the lower tier fossils are actually pretty good early game. For example, Jagged Fossils, Dense Fossils, all that good stuff. And even if they're not super expensive, say only like 2 chaos each or something, maybe 3 chaos each for some of them. Of course, some of them are very cheap, like Frigid or Metallic, but yeah. Even if that's the case, Exalts are also really, really cheap in the first few days of a league, so you don't need to be getting tons and tons of GG fossils to amount to quite a few Exalts. So I would probably put that in a B tier. Now, I personally don't think it's worth doing, especially if you're going to be, doing it legitimately. because as I mentioned in the last video, there are some exploits that allow you to do this much, much better to where it probably become as high as an S tier. But if you don't want to get banned, and you probably don't want to get banned, then, and you're going to be doing it legitimately, then I think it's a B tier. I don't think it's game breaking or anything crazy out of this world, but it's a pretty decent way to make currency with very little investment. Next, we have regular Elder, and that's going to be a solid S tier. Pretty much every single drop from normal Elder has a decent bit of value in the first 3 days of a league, because a lot of them are build enabling. A lot of them allow builds to really push what kind of content they're doing, so they hold value. Not only that, you're going to be dropping fragments for Uber Elder, which, while I don't recommend Uber Elder in the first few days, because it's just nobody's going to be buying their drops, normal Elder, on the other hand, is amazing. In presences, for example, you have the Chaos in presence, which is worth upwards of 10 exalts at the start of a league for the first few days. You have the physical in presence, which is typically half of that, or a little bit less. But you also have all those other different uniques, Mark of the Shaper, Mark of the Elder, blah, 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 that tend to be worth pretty decent currency. And not only that, you're guaranteed the Uber Elder fragments, which alone are going to cover some of the cost of those runs. So easy S tier for normal Elder in phase 1 of a league. Shaper is the same thing. Now, if you've seen my last video, you'll see that Shaper and Uber Elder all go downwards after the first phase of a league. Day 4 onwards, they are going to start dropping. And that is because the demand for their drops just goes down. There's less and less people needing those different uniques, and people are starting to look into bigger ticket item. So a lot of those drops go down. There's also, nowadays, there's a lot of divination cards for a lot of those drops as well. So for example, Dying Sun, which is one of the better drops from Shaper, has a div card now. Starforge has a div card, etc., etc. So there's a lot of div cards, and the gloves and the boots, which are the most common drops from Shaper, highly, highly, highly devalue after the first few days. But if you can get the Shaper like day 1, day 2, you will make bank, especially because you're also getting fragments for Uber Elder, which once the time comes to go farm Uber Elder, you're already going to have some fragments available, which is big money. Again, though, Uber Elder, first few days of a league, is an F tier for me. Nobody's really buying the drops, nobody's buying, Eternity Shroud, nobody's buying Triple Watcher's Eyes. And I say nobody, but there's always going to be somebody. But the thing is, in my opinion, taking that kind of risk is just not worth it. You're better off just farming the normal Elder. Now, if you're farming normal Elder and you're farming Shaper and you're getting the fragments for Uber Elder yourself, I'd recommend just running it. If you're able to, there's no reason to sell those fragments. You're going to want to run them later anyways. And if you get a good 2-prop Watcher's Eye or even single props, so for example, Chaos or Damage Over Time multiplier by Malevolence is worth an insane amount, like 20x plus in the first week of a league easily for a single mod, or Base Crit Hatred upwards of 10x, Pen Hatred, etc., etc. All those, even 1 stat, and you have 3 stat jewels from Uber Elder, so the odds of getting at least one of them that's pretty decent is pretty decent. So don't sell your Uber Elder fragments, but I wouldn't recommend going out of your way to buy them just to purely farm Uber Elder in the first phase, again, the first 3 days. Next, we have Uber Edziri, and that's also an easy S tier. Most of her drops, if not all of them, are worth pretty damn good money in the first 3 days of a league, especially her most common one, which is the Vertex, which is where most of your currency is going to come from outside of maps. But also her axe is pretty good, obviously. The gloves are pretty good, obviously. They have less demand, especially because melee is not super good anymore. But still, the axe and the gloves are both going to sell for at least something and easily going to refund you your runs. It's pretty much impossible to lose money on Uber Edziri, because even just the red maps, because Uber Edziri is, I believe, a level 81 or 83 zone or something, so she's going to be dropping a lot of red maps. Also know that every monster in Edziri is either rare or magic, so lots and lots of rare of map drops, lots of red maps as well. It adds up very quickly, and this is why Uber Edziri is one of the best money-making methods in the game when it comes to the first 3 days of a league, something that was showcased many times in the past. All right, next we have Normal Lab. So as I mentioned earlier, the Uber Lab is kind of going to be difficult to get into. Uber Zao is really hard, and the availability of the Gifts of the Goddess is just not really there. but the normal lab is an A tier. Now, it's not an S tier, or at least I don't consider it to be an S tier, but it's still really, really good. And unlike, say, Uber Ziri, unlike Shaper, unlike Uber Elder, it doesn't require a very good build. You could easily make like a phase breaker Jug that just sits there and puts his totems down or something and just murders Uber Zero, never dies, pretty much immortal build, right? That can just walk through, do like full key runs in like 7 or 8 minutes with Leap Slam, with a weapon swap, with like Prismatic Eclipse or whatever, and just fucking blasting through lab, and doing full key runs. Again, I don't typically ever recommend doing full key runs, because I don't think they're efficient. I think you're better off just going for enchant runs, getting those enchant as fast as possible. But in the first stage of a league, the first 3 days, I actually do recommend doing full key runs, because a lot of these things that are dropping through the chest, you can get some red maps, get a lot of uniques, you can get some good jewelry. A lot of those different things actually add up to a fair bit of currency, level gems, quality gems, sacrifice fragments, etc., etc. There's a lot of value there, so full key runs is the way to go. And yeah, enchants are basically like a bonus. And after the third day, the first phase of a league, that's when I would say, if your character is able to do it, you know, start looking into the bigger version and stop the full key runs. Just go for as many enchants per hour as possible. And next we have Harvest. Obviously, Harvest crafting is going to be an S tier. Any sort of deterministic crafting is going to be an S tier, because even non-deterministic crafting is an S tier. So we don't know in what capacity Harvest is coming back, but we do know that we're getting some of it back. So yeah, S tier. I mean, if you think about, for example, in Harvest, one of the most popular league starting build was Bleed Bow, I believe Gladiator or something. And lots of people were playing that. And they were getting insane physical damage bows as early as like Blood Aqueducts, that was better than most bows that would get in any other league in like red maps. So Harvest crafting is obviously kind of nuts. Any sort of deterministic crafting is going to be insane. So S tier easily for that. Next, we have a Resonator, which is for every other sort of crafting here, and that's also going to be an S tier. Now, in all of the methods previously mentioned, I think the best ones for the first stage of league, the first 3 days, is going to be obviously anything related to crafting, and then Elder, and then Uber Ziri. I think Shaper is not as good as it used to be, obviously, and I think the other things are also good, but not as good as these right here. Normal Elder, Uber Ziri, and any sort of crafting. But by far, the best is going to be crafting. And that is just because crafting is insane. And if you know what you're doing, as early as even day 1, you can start crafting. Now, this is not a video where I'll be telling you what to craft on day 1. Actually, I don't have any videos related to, you know, what you should craft and when on day 1, because those are secrets that you need to learn by yourself, because people put a lot of time and effort into researching how to properly craft on day 1, what to craft, how to make currency with crafting day 1. But I can tell you that 20, 30, 40, 50 exalts on the first day of a league, or the first 24 hours, is doable via crafting if you know what you're doing. So yes, crafting is kind of insane. But I'm sure you guys all know that, as I've advertised for crafting for the last like 3 years. All right, next we have Prophecies, and that is going for prophecy farming, and that is going to be an A tier. Now, it's an A tier only on day 1. It very, very quickly diminishes. On day 2, it's probably a B tier, and on day 3, it's probably a D tier. But on day 1, it's an easy A tier. Not because you're going to be making mirrors and mirrors off of currency, off of prophecy farming, but because prophecy farming is a really good stepping stone into getting some early currency to start doing things that are going to lead to more currency quicker. What I mean by that is upgrading your character, for example, before even reaching maps is doable via prophecy farming. Getting enough currency to be able to afford mapping materials and skipping the chaos recipe entirely is doable through prophecy farming, right? It's a good stepping stone to do other things that are going to lead to more currency. I don't think that prophecy farming in itself is very good, but it's a good way to get early game money before anyone else really does, because you can start prophecy farming as early as literally the second or third hour of a league before most people have even reached maps. So yeah, very, very solid there. All right, next we have normal Atziri, and that is going to be probably about a C tier. Now, on day 1, I would probably put it as a B tier. On day 2 and 3, though, it's C and D, and it just keeps going down. On day 1, though, it's probably about a B tier, my bad. Why a B tier? Now, I've been an advocate of normal Atziri farming for a while, but unfortunately, ever since the Conqueror of the Atlas, normal Atziri lost a lot of its value. The main reason for farming Atziri used to be for T3 and T4 and T5 maps. Because that was a good way to kickstart people into the old Atlas, where you were starting from the outside and going to the inside. So for anybody, you know, who remembers that, who's been playing for since more than 3.0 or 3.0, is it? No, since more than Conquerors of the Atlas, right? Since the start of 3.0 is what I should be saying. But now that we have Conquerors of the Atlas, where we start in the middle and we go outwards, and then we do the whole like ping-ponging strategies and all that good stuff, those same T3, T4, and T5 maps lost a ton of value because they are very interchangeable and they are no longer like required in any way, right? Of course, people are still going to be buying them, but the demand for them is much, much lower. Also, people have gotten better at the game. You know, when it comes to Atlas pushing, there's a lot of different strategies for Atlas out there that require you to not have to buy any maps and stuff like that. Hence, like the video that I posted the other day is a prime example of that. So yeah, it's not that good. That being said, on the first day of a league, it's a good way to easily farm some rare items for a Chaos Recipe, because again, every monster in Atziri is either rare or magic. It's a good way to make some easy currency because you have the flasks. All it takes is a 15% elemental roll to be worth a decent amount. All the other rolls are worth like whatever, but the price of a full Atziri set is like 5 or 6 chaos, and those flasks are selling for like more than that. And if you get a good roll on it, say the 15 elementals extra chaos, that is easily like 20, 30, 40 C. So that's mostly where your money's going to come from. It's not quality, it's quantity. You're going to be wanting to do a lot of them. Also, you have the Atziri boots, which drops from normal Atziri. And the Atziri boots are typically worth anywhere from 30 to 40 chaos on the first day of a league. Especially ever since I mentioned them, and they've become more and more common in other content creators' guides on build starters. So it wasn't like back the first time I used those boots, the Atziri steps, on my first build was when I made the 20 Chaos Miner, and I had gotten them for extremely cheap, and even leagues before that they were super cheap. But ever since like Delirium and Harvest, they've been more and more expensive, and now people are putting them a lot on Trickster builds and all that, so they've become quite expensive, and they're not that rare. Especially because you're going for quantity over quality, since you can really blast through normal Atziri very quickly. So yeah, B tier, in my opinion. That's my final answer there. Next, we have Simulacrums. That's going to be an F tier. Again, not because it's bad, but because it's not really available, and most people will not have a build that is able of farming Simulacrums for the first 3 days. Especially for the first day. That's not going to be doable, but even for the first 3 days, it's not going to be available to most people, because you do want to get those 5 bars of rewards, as I mentioned in the previous video. All right, next we have skill gem leveling, and that's going to be an F tier as well. For most people, the first 2 days, it's going to take the first 2 or 3 days even just to get their first set of level 20 gems. So, you know, after that, they're going to have to focus on leveling other gems for themselves to try to get those level 2120 to flip their gems to 20 quality, etc., etc. It's not really a viable way to make currency early unless you're somebody who is purely making a build dedicated to gem XP farming, and I don't think that's that good anymore, especially with alternate quality gems being added to the game, because people are always going to be focusing on getting those instead, since they're just better, right? And there's also the awakened gems that are not going to be available for leveling in the first few days. It's just, yeah, it's not really viable, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Next, we have stacked decks. Obviously an F tier, even more so than last video. Last video I put in an F tier because I was like, it's gambling, it's bad. Now, not only am I saying it's gambling, it's bad, but you're gambling precious currency. In the first stage of a league, the first 3 days, currency is every chaos matters. Literally every chaos matters, and you don't want to be spending that precious currency on gambling, especially not stacked decks after the multiple nerfs that they have received. Okay, next we have emblem farming. So obviously we're not talking about 5-way emblem farming. That requires a good build and a headhunter at the very least. But what you can do is 4-way emblem farming. Now, you're not going to be able to get an insane amount of rewards from the 4-ways unless you have a really good build. But there is a caveat. You can actually sell the carries for the 4-way legions for people to unlock their 5-way map device. A lot of people, especially people juicing, are going to want to get those 5-way map device as early as possible. So what you can do is get the 4 cheapest emblem, which means that you're not going to be getting the Mariketh emblem, and then you run it to about the end, and then you get people inside your zone, inside the area, just to be able to kill the bosses one more time, and then they all get access to the 5-way map device, and they tip you or pay you whatever fee that you have for this. And those fee alone for 2 or 3 people should easily cover the cost of the entire 4-way emblem. So if you can get a full lobby, you're making profit alone off of those, and you're getting all the loot in the map, which is huge. So probably about an A tier, because obviously it requires you to have other people with you. Well, not necessarily with you, but it requires you to have other people to pay for the service, the carry. And it's also a little bit tedious to get the emblems, because early game, you're probably going to be ending up buying the fragments and not the emblem, or the splinters and not the emblems, just because the availability isn't really there. And the people who are selling emblems are overpricing the crap out of them. And finally, we have our regular mapping, and that is going to be an easy S tier. Of course, mapping is always an S tier early game. I mean, you're dropping maps, which you can sell. You're dropping uniques. You're getting XP on your gems. You're getting XP on your character. You're, making your way up the Atlas to where you can farm the Conquerors and Cyrus. Everything related to mapping is going to be currency, and I don't recommend magic farming low tier maps. You want to just push through the Atlas as fast as possible. Get to the end game. Get to Cyrus. Get to Awakener 8 and blah blah blah. Now that's not something you do in the first 3 days. At least 99.999% of the population will not be getting to Awakener 8 Cyrus. But in the first 3 days, you should be able to get to Awakener level, 4 or 5, or the first one, whatever it is. Especially if you watch my last video about, not my last video, but the one before that about the Atlas, or the one before that actually, about the Atlas and how to really blast through the Atlas incredibly fast, even in a solo self-found environment, without buying anything from anybody. And without needing completion on your Atlas either, because the way that strategy works is that every single map you're running has a goal. Anyways, just watch the videos if you're interested in that. It's a really good strategy there, and it's not mine. Again, it's from a dude on Reddit. So now, if you're paying attention, if you're looking at the screen right now, you'll see that most things are S tier, and then some are A tier, not much B tier, and everything in the F tier is not necessarily because it's bad, but more so because it's not available. So we kind of have a trend here, and I guess the message that I want to get across is that really 40 minutes just to tell you guys that it doesn't really matter what you're doing in this game. In the first 3 days of a league, if you're killing monsters, if you're killing bosses, if you're crafting items, if you're flipping, if you're whatever you're doing, really, farming lab as well, it doesn't really matter. In the first stage of a league, which is the first 3 days, if you're doing content, you will make currency. Now, there are some ways that are better than others, as I've mentioned in this video. For example, Elder and Uber Zeri being some of the better methods compared to running contracts or chaos recipe farming. Obviously, there's some things that are going to be better than others, but it's not about what you're really doing in the first few days of a league, and more so about how efficient you are at doing what you're doing. So that's the two things that matter the most. Is one, how much you're playing. Now, of course, somebody who plays 12 hours versus somebody who plays 3 hours is going to make more currency if all things are equal and they're running the same content at the same efficiency, right? And the second thing is exactly that, efficiency. It's not about, oh, I'm farming Shaper and you're farming Elder, so you make more currency than me. Because if you're more efficient at farming Shaper than somebody else is at farming Elder, you might just make more currency than them. If you're more efficient at farming contracts than somebody is at crafting, or somebody's knowledge is with crafting and they're crafting random crap that nobody cares about and nobody needs yet, you're going to make more currency than them. So what I want you guys to do when it comes to the first few days of a league is try to identify not, oh, what am I going to make the most currency doing, but what do I enjoy the most doing that is also in this list and that is also considered profitable. Because if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're probably going to play more and you're probably going to be more efficient. You're going to spend less time in your hideout. You're going to spend less time thinking about, oh, should I be doing this or that or whatever. And you're going to be spending more time just actually enjoying the game, playing the game, and therefore making more currency than if you were to just sit in your hideout and be like, oh, I really fucking hate this farming, but I have to do it because this is what Matt said was the best currency for the first 3 days, right? So hopefully this video explains and gets across the point that really there are some things that are better than others, but it all comes down to time played and efficiency. But before I go, as always, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters, Mario, Luro, Gaikona, Cluzy, Dino, Born to Reign, Scott, Kevin, Casticus, and Axel, as well as, of course, anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous and anybody else who has supported me in the past. Hopefully this video is helpful, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.